On February the 28th, 2005, a very special train was due to depart from London's Victoria Station. That was the Staite Pullman, run in honour of Bernard Staite, a figure who has done so much to support and expedite the running of mainline steam on the British Railway network in the last 30 years. The train was due to be hauled by Western Class 1015 Western Champion on its route from Victoria via Reading and the Berks and Hants line to Paignton, where steam was to take over. The train was to be made up of the Orient Express Pullmans, and the guest list for the day read like a who's who of railway preservation and the mainline steam movement, all of whom had come to join in the celebration of Bernard Staite's retirement. Bernard himself was on great form, greeting many of the guests and renewing many old acquaintances.
Amen.
Meanwhile at Taunton, the two steam engines scheduled to work the train, King Edward I and Bradley Manor, were being prepared for the journey. Bradley Manor had been specially through-piped for air brake to enable it to work the train with King Edward I in the traditional Great Western manner with the pilot engine coupled inside the train engine. The sound of the Westinghouse air brake pump on King Edward I may have given some people the impression that the location was some 3,000 miles further west than Taunton. It was also the first occasion in 20 years that these two classes have worked together on the main line, making the day an even more memorable occasion. During the stop at Tiverton Loops, Bernard went forward and, with the loan of Inspector Gareth Jones' driver's cap, boarded the footplate of the Manor for the remainder of the trip to Torbay. After leaving Exeter, the train ran along Bernard's favourite piece of railway, the stretch of the Great Western Main Line along the coast between Dawlish Warren and Teignmouth. passage of the train through Newton Abbot station illustrates just what people like Bernard have helped to preserve for future generations. A steam train passing through a station is an event. A diesel train is a non-event. On arrival at Paignton's National Network station platform, Bernard's face on the footplate says it all. It has been a splendid journey, and now the opportunity comes for those who wish to travel further afield to journey on some preserved buses to Buckfast Abbey further up the Dart Valley, whilst the steam engines depart from working the train for maintenance. The King had developed an air brake problem during the journey, and great deal of work was put in by the staff of the 6024 Society and members of the Paignton and Dartmouth Railway to rectify the problem whilst the engines laid over at Churston. Having reassembled at the Paignton Dartmouth railway station, there was a further chance to renew old acquaintances and then for some speeches to be made commemorating the occasion.
Great silence for Mr. Paul Blowfield.
I did think I had a loud voice. I now revise that opinion. But nonetheless, ladies and gents, you may or may not know that there is a little traction problem at the moment. And
We believe it's fixed.
Details are a little sketchy, so unfortunately I don't think we're going to make a right time departure, nor can I actually promise what's going to be on the front. But as we're in Great Western Territory, nothing changes. Can I finish now?
You don't wish to come back.
For free from here.
Says who, matey?
You're about to change that, Raymond. Seriously. First of all, obviously, good afternoon. And I have been asked to be Master of Ceremonies, which is a little bit of a misnomer for me, because I don't regard myself as being a master of anything.
I don't know.
Don't give anything away. And as for ceremonies, well, I steer clear of those, particularly if they've got bells, vows, and wedding
That's what I meant.
But essentially, why I'm standing up here speaking at you is to say a number of thank yous. And I know quite a lot has been printed in the Through the Window guide, but nonetheless, I do believe it has to be repeated. Thank you for coming today, first of all, to all those gathered here. And I do recognise it was a pretty short notice. And for that reason, I'd just like to take a minute or so to read out the apologies, particularly to Bernard and Dorothy and the family, for those people who were invited, but unfortunately have sent their apologies. So bear with me. We have Stephen Cornish, Peter Pryor, Fred Barnard, Brian Allen, John Duncan, Stephen Phillips, Michael Whitehouse, Sir William McAlpine, James Bemrose, Sam Foster, David Shepherd, Alan Dance, Ken and Joan Gregory, Roger Orpin, Simon Bryant, Mike Phillips, Eddie and Marion Taylor, Chris Brawson, Susan de la Vega, Nigel Smith, Matthew Galton, Barry Koga, who of course has lent us his station, but he's in New Zealand. We think. Charles Belcher, Nick Parsons, God knows who this is, Stephen Hurricane Higgins, Dave Ludlow, Ian Riley, Norman Hugill, Andrew Overton, Kerry Parker, Nick Bostock, Kenny Harper, Peter Brandt, and last but not least, possibly, Nigel Harris. Additionally, we received late apologies from Messrs. Brunel, Churchwood and Collett.
Churchwood, just down there.
Brunel, Churchwood and Collett, but unfortunately they couldn't come. Maudsley and Bullig said that they wouldn't mix in such company. Now then, I personally have known Bernard for a little bit over 20 years, and I could actually ramble on for ages and ages, as you probably think I am already, with plenty of anecdotes, but I'm certainly not going to do so.
God for that.
What I would say, if there was just one thing that Bernard especially didn't like about doing his job over the years for whoever he was working for, was the very many times when promoters, loco owners, and dare I say even Network Rail or rail track timers dealt directly with each other. Well, Bernard, for today's train, you haven't known a bloody thing. It's fair to say that in the 30-odd years that BJS has been involved one way or another with organising charter trains on the big railway, I would agree certainly, and many people here would, that it's never been easy. And as the years have gone by, especially since, of course, the advent of the privatised railway, it's got to be more and more difficult, working as we are in what is undoubtedly a pretty hostile environment. I would have to say, therefore, that to have a train that we had the pleasure of travelling on today is a pretty remarkable achievement in the year 2005. So, how has it come about? It's come about because 4 or 5 people, including myself, Phil Swallow, Bob Barnes, Andrew Overton and Alan Rees, got absolutely arseholed just before Christmas on the BSOE.
He means drunk. I wasn't. Bullshit.
Not the most truthful statement of the day. And we stood around a table after being entertained on the BSOE and said, I think we ought to do something. Now, I'd mentioned to a few people a bit before Christmas, do you not think we ought to do something? And ideas were kicked around. But thanks to the Cabernet Sauvignon or Soave or Chardonnay or whatever it was on the BSOE, followed by several pints of real ale in the pub across the road from Victoria, we're all here today. Quite seriously, the Staite Pullman could not have happened without the input of lots of people, many of whom I probably won't have time to mention. All of them, and I repeat, all of them, have given their time, their organisation's resources, all their money, free of charge. Everyone has been absolutely tremendous, but I will just single out 2 or 3. First of all, Andrew Overton, who is the General Manager of the BSOE British Pullman, as it's called. He couldn't be here today, sadly. He has been tremendous. He has donated the train and made the arrangements for the food that we've already eaten and will enjoy tonight. Twisting arms, right, left and centre, and putting in a huge input has been Phil Swallow, who brought you all to order. Phil, for those of you who don't know him, is the major shareholder, if that's the right word, with the Western Diesel, D1015, and Tor Valley, or Ottery St Mary as it currently is. Phil has underwritten all of the BSOE staff costs for the day. I then go on to the various people within the King Society organisation, Alan Rees and the Severn Valley team, including, of course, especially through piping the locomotive so it could work inside the King. Jeff Griffiths, Nick Gibbons and all the EWS crews who, as you probably read, have worked voluntarily today. Stephen Cornish of Network Rail, who again sadly couldn't be with us today. He agreed to waive all planning and access charges when I told him the day after our meeting that he didn't have any choice. He very kindly agreed that I could work for nothing as well. Yes, I am on a day off today. And even many other people, of course, Joe and Andy in Pastime Rail, who've done so much admin work. They've been absolutely tremendous. And even the photographers, who I know get much maligned, but some of you know I tend to count myself in them. A lot of them have contributed a lot of money for timing sheets, all of which is going to the nominated charity. Carl Jauncey of PSOV, who's putting together a video of the day. John Farrow here of Hertfordshire Rail Tours did all the arranging of the buses that have taken many of you to and from Buckfast Abbey. Barry Koga, who again sadly can't be here for the facilities on the Paignton and Dartmouth. Raffle prizes, again, I won't go through all of them, but certainly Phil Swallow, Andy Staite, Marcus Robertson, and plenty of other people have, shall we say, called in a few favours to enable us to have such wonderful raffle prizes. And the last thank you I want to say is to Bernard. Now, Bernard has been a friend and colleague of mine for 22 years, something like that. We haven't always seen eye to eye, have we, Bernard? No change. Plenty of other people in this room, obviously, would say that, and I don't think we would disagree that disagreements create healthy relationships.
They do.
But what I would say is that if it wasn't for Bernard, we wouldn't be here today, purely and simply. And when the history of charter trains, and especially mainline steam since 1971, gets to be written, there are many people who deserve enormous credit. Most of those are unsung heroes. There's a few standing in this room today. Many of them are down in the sidings or down at Churston at this moment. These people give their time and effort, and they never ever get their name in the papers, so to speak. But nonetheless, they've toiled away diligently and in the background to keep locos running or simply to make things happen. And that's where Bernard comes in, because from my viewpoint, when this history gets written, there are two names that will always be at the forefront. One is David Ward, standing over there, who I cannot believe retired over 10 years ago, and the other is Bernard Staite. Now, Bernard's about to drop the fire for the final time. So I would say, Bernard, on behalf of all of us out there who are still not ashamed to call ourselves railway enthusiasts, and who thought in 67 in the south and 68 in the southwest was really the end, we're delighted that it wasn't quite the case. To you, Bernard, thank you. I'm now going to hand on to somebody I was going to describe as Bernard's oldest customer, but he wouldn't like that. I was then going to describe him as Bernard's biggest customer. I'd be even more dodgy waters. If I say he's his most long-standing customer, I'm getting down. So, John Farrow.
Clamber up here.
Right.
Paul, yes. Good afternoon to you all. Thank you, Paul, for those words. Good afternoon, everybody. I am, as you John Farrow from the Hertfordshire Rail Tours. I've got other names. If you ask David Ward, he'll tell you I'm the Barrow boy. But if you ask Bernard, of course, I am the old fat man. Even though I've lost nearly 2 stone. But never mind. So many of the railways great and good here today, and I'm neither, I was really surprised but delighted when Andy and Paul asked me to say a few words. To add my own personal thanks from the position of a tour operator, to Bernard for everything he's done. In common with quite a lot of us here, Bernard is one of the fortunate people who have managed to turn their hobby into their business. And as we spend so much time at work, we're lucky people to be able to do that. But with Bernard, it was more than just his working life that was devoted to steam trains, but it was, of course, his whole life. Growing up as a train spotter in Herefordshire, small wonder he was a Great Western steam man from the very start. But his first ventures into the weird and wonderful world of charter trains were not steam at all. They were, I'm told, mystery trips. I should clarify, these trips were meant to be mystery trips, not the tours that we know to turn into mystery trips. I think I'm correct in saying you did some charters initially with Swindon cross-country DMUs?
Three-car cross-country.
Three-car cross-country units.
162 seats.
162 seats, should you ever want to charter one. With a Buffy car in the middle carriage.
That's exactly right.
But of course that wasn't enough for Bernard. He wanted steam and was determined to get it. Unfortunately, at that time, the British Railways Board thought otherwise. They had got rid of steam in 1968 in a premature and quite obsessive manner, as we all know. Everything that moved from that point had to be modern, it had to be blue, and it had to have a double arrow on the side. Or so they thought. They had not counted on Bernard.
That's right.
In the early 70s, this time heading up the 6,000 Locomotive Association, King George V, and the very distinctive Pullmans in their strange green and cream livery. Bernard managed to establish a rapport with the British Railways Board and managed to convince them that a properly structured steam rail tour programme was at least worth a try. And in that environment, that was no mean achievement. He went on to become the kingpin of Slough as their operations manager, working with David Ward, coordinating the entire steam programme. That, of course, was a demanding role, but perhaps what we tend to forget after all these years is that he was doing all this in his spare time. He still worked as a technical salesman, travelling the length and breadth of the land for nickel alloys. He was out on the road every day, then came home and spent every evening on the phone taking bookings, sending out tickets. A huge commitment for a man with a young family, but for a man like Bernard, it just came naturally. It couldn't go on forever. In the mid-80s, Slough was having problems, as you may recall, with the Metcam Pullmans and the asbestos front, and something needed to be done, and in stepped Bill McAlpine, who founded Pullman Rail. Bernard said farewell to nickel alloys and went full-time on charter trains in 1985, by pure coincidence, the same year that I left BR and went full-time on charter trains. From that point on, the ever-changing face of steam and the railway in general meant that Bernard was never working for the same company for very long. It's not that he wanted to move, it's just that everything around him kept changing. Pullman Rail broadened out into Flying Scotsman Service Limited. Then came privatisation, with Bernard working for Sir William and Pete at Waterman Railways. For whatever reason, that marriage was short-lived, as we know. Thus was born Rail Charter Services, which in turn was taken over by EWS relatively recently, and here we all are today. Bernard moved office to Derby, and then Crewe, and then Doncaster. Continued upheaval, commuting huge distances by car every day. A gruelling workload with, I have to say recently in particular, nothing like enough staff to support him. But he was Bernard, so he got through. We all have our own favourite recollections of Bernard, don't we? Well, I remember, actually, I didn't really know him in the days of summer because I wasn't involved really on the steam front, but I remember the very first words that Bernard said to me. I don't know if Bernard remembers what the first words were he said to me.
Something rude, no doubt.
It was at Marylebone Station, and the guard was at the country end of the train, having very great difficulty retracting the buffers on the leading carriage so that 4472 could drop on and a couple up on the Buckeye. So true to form, Bernard went down on the floor to give a hand. But alas, while he was down there, a little old lady flushed the toilet. You remember it now?
I do remember. Very, very well.
As he climbed back onto the platform, he was determined to vent his wrath on the nearest person he could find, and that, ladies and gentlemen, was me. Thus, what was to become a long and interesting business relationship began with the immortal words, "I take the very greatest exception to being shat on." Bernard is, of course, an entertaining character. He's well known for his favourite sayings. Many a time I've been told, "Don't shoot the messenger." Or the other one, "Your point is well made, my boy." How many times has he confided something in you, prefixed by those immortal words, "Now don't you go telling anybody I told you." He could also put down people brilliantly. I remember Michael Timms being told, he's told lots of things, he's told, "At the end of the day, you're just a little boy with a diesel." Never threw away. Nowadays, of course, he's a little boy without a diesel. If you offended, you were given an old gypsy's warning. We'll all remember Bernard for his total and undivided loyalty to the charter train business and the steam movement, and his insatiable appetite for working long hours. The simple, unashamed hard work. He pioneered, of course, the Pullman scenic land cruises, and in the golden age of intercity with David, these grew into a massive programme. He and Dorothy were never at home for more than a couple of days at a time. On Thursday, he'd be off getting ready for the next day's departure to Mallaig or Cardiff-Lochcalsh, and he wouldn't be back home in Lichfield until the small hours of Tuesday morning. All his other work, meetings and the like, were then crammed into the following 48 hours, and on Thursday he was off again on the same circuit, non-stop, throughout what had become a very long operating season. The trains were at that time extremely popular. He travelled to America to promote the land cruise programme, and he also travelled to Japan. I'm told that on one occasion there was a problem with 4472, and he did a day trip to sort it out. That day trip, ladies and gentlemen, was to Australia. He was in the air longer than he was there. He organised some very prestigious railway events, conveying royalty in the form of Queen Mother, Princess Royal, the rich and famous Neil Diamond and Michael Jackson, moving swiftly on, special trains to launch the Ford Granada and the Challenger tank, arguably one of the same figures. Most of the winning teams of the FA Cup. He did a lot, but we were never allowed to forget that his first love was steam, and of course especially Great Western steam. To finish, I've heard it said by some that Bernard could be a cantankerous old bugger. Never. Possibly so. On one occasion, I committed a cardinal sin by using one of the Mark I vacuum brake Network Southeast Northampton cobbler sets for a programme of trips, instead of his fondly remembered BM90, the Beryl and Cheryl set. And he didn't speak to me for 2 years. But that is not how I will look back on the time I've worked with Bernard. To me, Bernard was one of those rare people who, through dedication, encyclopedic knowledge about railways, and I said downright hard work, steered the charter train business successfully through a period of daunting challenges. He has earned his place in history as a truly great railwayman. it only remains for me to thank you, Bernard, on behalf of Hertfordshire Rail Service and all the other tour operators, and also that great unsung band, the people that actually buy a ticket to travel on these trains, who often get forgotten about, quite rightly, for everything you have done for us. Thank you, Bernard, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to say, we have one more speaker. After that, we have the raffle, which Peter Watts is going to advise you on, and a very quick presentation from me. I can hear noises outside, so something is happening, but I still don't think 1644 is going to be achieved. So, can I hand over to J.A.?
Thank you, Paul, ladies and gentlemen. I was born a short glass, so I'll stay there. I'll try and pretend to be any taller. John missed out on one of Bernard's most regular favourite sayings. You never heard it, because it was Farrow's train's gone tits up. That would be a fairly common saying. For some reason, over many, many years, on trains worked by Seven Valley Engines, Bernard's always parked himself in the support coach. I think that's largely because nobody else would speak to him. And that was a very, very common saying, like most Saturday afternoons. I was asked to fill in 2 minutes before the train went, and you will only get 2 minutes. I shan't go on very much longer. But most of the things that need to be said have already been said. I'd just like to say we're having a fantastic day out today. We've got a tremendous selection of locomotives, including the diesel traction group's yellow machine, which you saw on the front of the train, and we'll see going back to London, the two Great Western engines, which were hand-picked as being known to be Bernard's favourite engines. We've got the fabulous train, the superfood, and even the weather gods have been very kind. It's been a super day, full of enjoyment, but certainly for me, it's a bittersweet enjoyment, because Bernard, as we all know, is the end of your career. I'm sure it's not the end of your involvement with Steam, because Dorothy's taking bookings for your consultancies. in the best tradition of the railway industry, going on. But in the 33, 34 years that you've been involved in Steam, I think that your drive, your enthusiasm, and your professionalism have brought to the steam movement a degree of acceptance by the national railway system, originally as British Rail. You've made us respectable because you were able to prove very often that the amateur railwaymen, for want of a better word, locomotive operators, train operators and so on, which of course included you initially, before you took the Queen's shilling, went to work for the other side. You proved that we could be just as professional as the professionals, and in very many instances, dare I say, more professional than the professionals. Now, Paul mentioned there are two big names in Steam over 30 years, David Ward and Bernard Staite. Without any disrespect to David, and I haven't seen him yet today, but perhaps he'll be very later. David Ward, most of you will know, is always known as the General. I would suggest that Bernard was probably the Sergeant Major, and anybody who's been in the army knows who runs things. If I can relate just one very brief story, as most of you know, I was in the army myself, and I was in Germany once, and my sergeant had just been on an attachment to the German army, And when he came back, I said, how did you get on there? And he said, oh, bloody marvellous system they got there. So I said, well, what's that then? He said, there's only 2 officers in the company. I said, well, what's marvellous about that? We've got 8 or 9. He said, well, it's enough to carry the can, but not enough to bugger everything up. And Bernard, I would regard you certainly as the Sergeant Major, not the General, because you got things done. We've all loved you, 30 odd years. We've had the occasion of hating your guts, largely when you told us that the light engine was departing at 024 and then got back about 0620. EWS in the meantime put 6 crews on their engine. We had 1 crew. A bit like that today.
No, not quite.
Personally, I think through life you have lots and lots of colleagues and you have a small number of friends. We're going to lose you as a colleague, Bernard, to a degree because you're about to retire. I know personally, and I'm sure everybody else does here, that we will never lose you as a friend. And for the 30 years that we've worked together, we have been bloody good mates. And I'd like to shake you by the hand because I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Just before Peter does the raffle, I'll do this first.
On the Duchess.
On behalf of the organising committee, because that's what this bunch of drunks call ourselves, don't we, Phil? Can I present you with what I'm told is your favourite engine? Well, I know it is, in your favourite location. So, 7802, on the seawall, approaching Teignmouth. Some bloke called Blowfield took this, so that's Pray silence for BJS.
First of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you most sincerely for coming today. I really have no idea this particular event, but I do know that there are a number of people who will put a lot of work into it. I'm extremely grateful to them. It might be a little bit churlish to name names because I may not name everybody, but one set of people I will name is my family, because without my family none of this would have ever taken place. My wife supported me for so many years and still does. And I'm extremely grateful to you. I will, if I may, just pay a special tribute to the staff of EWS. I've spoken to the footplate crews. In fact, I quite enjoyed the one footplate crew, from Tiverton Junction to Goodrington Sands, because I did something, well, I'm not going to tell you what it was.
Everybody knows that.
But oh, they can. But I thank the footplate men and the train men, the guards, the shunters. But there are other people who work in administrative positions, and there are very few who come from Doncaster. But to them, thank you. Without you, we probably couldn't have run. I will just also thank one other guy, known as Boss. Well, that's Phil. A more generous and kind-hearted man you couldn't wish to meet. And I wish you every success, Phil, with your diesel and with Tall Valley. The only thing is, I wish you would rename it Westward Ho. I love Westward Ho. Perhaps one day you will. But again, I will try and walk through the train going back. And thank you all. But I am extremely grateful to you all for coming and making it such a memorable day. Thank you very much indeed.
Phil's just going to mention about, you all know about the charitable element of today's train. Phil's going to give us some good news.
Yep. Real quickly, the idea is that today there were two things. Clearly, retirement trip for Bernard. In addition, we all said that we would try and raise some money for charity, provided that we can pull in all the bits and pieces we need to pull in. With the gift aid as well, we have raised north of £20,000, which is a considerable... My doors are blown in. There are one or two of you who have not as yet donated. There is a small booth to the left there marked late pay. In accordance with the commercial debts law of 1999, we can charge 8% above base rate for those people that don't donate in time. Thank you very much indeed. It's a wonderful, wonderful achievement. With a figure expected to be over £4,000 from the raffle itself. And I must particularly mention Network Rail in this. Very surely but quietly they have added 1,250 to the network total. Sorry, to the grand total by Network Rail. So thank you to them.
Could I have your attention, please? Obviously, we're quite heavily delayed here. Hopefully, the steam locomotives will be bringing the stock in fairly shortly, and fingers crossed, we will get away for about 6:15, 18:15. What we have arranged with EWS to alleviate getting back to Victoria too late, we're going to go back the same way that we came out. In other words, the steam locomotives will take us as far as Taunton. They will then be detached and the Western Diesel will be attached and take us back via Newbury, setting down at Reading as before and then on to London Victoria. So that's what's being planned really as I speak, and hopefully we'll be able to claw back some of the time so that you're not getting back to either Reading or London Victoria too late. Thanks.
The return journey started in style from Paignton station, across the famous level crossing, and on the train's way back to London.
At the end of the day,
The lucky diners were treated to a repast consisting of goat's cheese, spinach and red onion tartlet with a red pepper sauce, followed by leek and potato soup with truffled Welsh rarebit, noisettes of Welsh salt marsh lamb, served with potatoes, a medley of vegetables and tomato and chilli jam. And not to be outdone, Britain got in at the end with a cheese board with homemade chutney, and Somerset apple tart with clotted cream and caramel sauce. One wonders if a forklift was provided afterwards to lift people off the train.
I'll tell you one of the things I enjoyed most about the Torbay Express. Yeah. Going back to Bristol on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And normally I object to people who don't contribute. But it's lovely. The families turned out to wait on our way. And it's the same families every Sunday.
On arrival at Taunton, internal combustion motive power was due once again to take over from external combustion, and during the change many more conversations took place as snowflakes began to fall, giving almost a Christmas atmosphere. During the stop, Bernard's children, Andy Staite and Joe Birkinshaw, took the opportunity to go around and thank many of the people who had organised this splendid day. anyone who enjoys seeing steam locomotives at work in the landscape on the British Railway network owes Bernard, his family and colleagues a debt of thanks for the work that has been put in over the years to ensure that this type of thing can still be done. It's a credit to Bernard and it's a credit to the British Railway network. Thank you, Bernard.